Welcome, everyone, to the Asset and Investment Review Task Force.
Can you verify that you can hear us online?
Yeah, it's all good. Okay, good. All right, my name is Marlo Oates, and I was given the lovely opportunity to chair this committee, task force, I guess. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. It's rare that we get a room full of people, because most people come in virtually these days. So, hey, wow, excellent.
Good to see you all.
Very nicely done. Here you go.
Thank you.
Welcome, Senator Stratton.
Great to be here. Thanks for all your work.
Awesome. So we are just starting off. So let's just briefly go around the room and then on the line, introduce ourselves. Senator Stratton.
Kevin Stratton, grateful to be here. I guess with a senator hat, the legislative hat on today.
That's right.
Brittany Griffin, Policy and Communications Deputy for Treasurer Oaks.
Tina Cannon, State Auditor.
Dan Gardner, Chief Examiner for the Department of Financial Institutions.
Kurt Swan in the Treasurer's Office.
The grant bidder with the Utah Association of Special Districts.
Tom Hubbard, Business Administrator for Grants School District.
Paul Jerome, Assistant CAO with West Jordan City.
Jason Allen, Financial Audit Director in the State Auditor's Office.
Marcy Mortensen, Data Analytics Intern for the State Auditor's Office.
Alex Nielsen, do data stuff for the state auditor, websites and releases.
And online.
Brooke McCarrick, Attorney General's Office.
Kim Jackson, Utah County Treasurer.
Val Peterson,
Howard Headley, Utah Bankers Association.
Val Peterson, Representative District 56.
Awesome.
Hesterman with the Utah Taxpayers Association.
Oh, good. Oh, yes. Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. We've got, hopefully all of you have the agenda in front of you. We are on to the minutes. Do we actually need to approve minutes?
Yeah, this is an official board or committee of the state.
Okay, all right. So, any questions on the minutes? If none, I will entertain a motion.
I would move to accept the minutes.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, next item is the investment study procurement. So we've gone out for through the procurement process to find a vendor to conduct a study that examines investment strategies for public funds. And we're in the final stages of approving that, and that should happen this week. And so I don't know, what else do I say?
Probably all we can say for now.
Okay, that's all you get. Sorry.
Marlo?
Yes, that's right. But I think you'll be happy with where we end up. Howard, yes.
Just ask, you were kind enough to send me a link to the, I don't know what that was, some place where people see notices to respond to notices for the RFPs, but I couldn't really dive in to see what the technical description of what we were asking them to prepare. And, I would hate to get to that point and find out that they're looking at something other than what we, had expected them to look at. So is there something that you can send me like in a hard copy form that?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you go to that link though and kind of scroll down and look at the attachments to download, all of the materials are there, but I can send them directly to you.
It seemed like it had closed or something but maybe.
I'll send you the materials and anybody else who would like them.
Yeah, happy to do that. Okay, excellent. Now for the meat of our meeting today. Got the public entity reserves data. The auditor's office has been working on going through data and looking at balances and a lot of exciting stuff. So, I'm gonna turn it over to you, Alex and Marcy. Sure, take us through it.
Tina, do you want to say anything before we start?
First of all, it's Data Magic Gurus. Is Alex's official job, Data Magic Guru. And with that, no further ado is necessary.
Awesome, thank you. Well, go ahead and start preparing the screen for presenting. I'll give some background. So based off the last meeting we had, some of the big takeaways we took were, let's focus a lot more on unrestricted cash and cash equivalents. The auditor's office has already been pulling out of annual financial reports. And let's compare that with some other kind of information we pull out of those annual comprehensive financial reports. And let's develop some ratio analysis as well as see how those are trending over time. We also wanted to dive in a little bit more into how that differs between different government types. So not only look at individual entities to find outliers, but for example, are cities a little bit different than school districts, which might be a little bit different than a special service district. So with that kind of background, Marcy has been working pretty much nonstop on this for the last month to integrate those three data sources, give you guys some examples of ratios and some of the comparison we can do. And the goal of today is to show you that new dashboard, get feedback, make sure it's answering the questions you guys like, and go from there. So I'm gonna turn the time over to Marcy because I think you guys are gonna really like what she's cooked up.
All right, perfect. So the first thing I want to point out is we have three different tabs. We have a single entity explorer, a statewide explorer, and an outliers tab. The single entity explorer points out specific entity names, while the statewide explorer looks through different government levels. And then our outliers tab looks more into different outliers and trends with unrestricted cash and cash equivalents. So in our single entity explorer, what we can do is select different entity names. So right now we have Alpine School District selected, and we can also select multiple. So let's do Davis School District as well. This will just take a second to load. There we go. So within this, we have various ratios that help show financial metrics to help assess a different entity's ability to manage cash. So I believe we have 8 total graphs looking at different ratios. Each graph shows a bit different things. You're able to see what the ratio is in that subtitle. And then for each of these, when you want to look at a specific value, we are able to point at each dot, see the entity name, the government level it's within, the specific year we're looking at, and that specific ratio percentage. Below each one is more of an explanation to what each ratio is trying to display or show. All right. So continuing on our single entity explorer, the next thing we wanted to show is more of our bank information. So we have our different entities in a stacked bar chart showing where the amount held is in, so which account type we have. So all of these different inputs will be able to be toggled upon to be able to see the specific values. One specific thing about the different bank info and deposit information I will show is if we scroll up to the top, we're able to also select a specific year we want to see. So right now we're looking at 2023, but let's say we want to look at 2022 for these values. We're able to see how that switched in 2022, and our little bar that pops up when we select will be able to tell you the year. Continuing on, we have a lot of deposit and investment information. So this first graph looks at the market value versus the cost value. So we took the market value and subtracted the cost value to give us how well our different entities are doing in relation to those type of values. So we're able to toggle upon those as well. We also have a heat map showing our custodial locations for the cost value. It's colored by scale. So you're able to see where most of the money is. So for this specific one, Alpine School District has more of their assets in a Vanguard custodial location. Our final tab in this single entity explorer, we're able to look at our total market value by security type and entity name. Both these graphs show similar things. One is just able to be selected for each specific year. The other provides every single year with each specific entity.
We'll show how we're to select it, it will
Yeah. So if we have for the specific one, okay, perfect. So on the left-hand side, if we have two specific things selected, we'll have the bars colored the same for agency, but there's a little line in between. So when you toggle on it, you're able to see this entity name for our security type of agency is for Davis School District, whereas this part is for Alpine School District. Our last two tabs are not impacted by filters at all. We just thought that these could be interesting. We just wanted some feedback on these. So this is the stack bar chart just to show market value, cost value, and book value per year. And then this one counts security type, and the dots show the amount of market value. So the bigger the dot, the more market value is within each entity.
So pausing real quick, as you can tell, we've just thrown a ton of different things at the wall, a ton of different ways to look at this, but really want a little more feedback from you on where we should drill into next. So with this first page, any questions and thoughts? Are we missing anything for a single entity exploration?
I would just commend you on your work. It looks great. I mean, it's fascinating and a bit shocking as well, and probably at least the data we're looking at now with these two single entities, not a lot of purple on the screen, and hence, you know, one of the issues that you know why I raised the issue I raised, and I guess I'm looking at Marlowe to know. I would assume most of these investments and these other non-qualified banks, everything other than a qualified bank CD, are investments that, I mean, what percentage of those investments would you think are being deployed in the state of Utah?
Not a lot.
Pretty small.
Mhm. Well, it's interesting equities, so that must be like a foundation, a district foundation.
Can be.
Not at that level.
Like 150 million.
You know, most foundations at school districts have 80 million.
Okay, so I don't.
Alpine's definitely an exception form of this.
Somebody else in the foundation when it reached 1 million and then went to 2, so I don't, probably.
Was that 1950?
Sorry.
Last 20 years, wasn't
Wow.
Alpine will be an anomaly because they have a trust that they hold their OPEBs.
Oh,
And so that trust is probably what's skewing the appearance of equities.
interesting. Okay.
I have a question on the data. Did you pull all of this from the deposit investment report? Is that where all of this data comes from?
So yes, so some of the data is coming from the DNI reports, and then
Okay.
other data is coming from the ACRs. So a lot of the ratios.
To make the ratio.
Mhm.
What about budgetary information? Have you guys got into budgetary information to compare budgets and actuals?
Yeah, so we can start pulling some of the budget information. We wanted to start here, but we can't get the budgeted. And that's on me. I just interpreted from last time. We were more focused on that unrestricted cash that was getting captured for that difference between the budgeted versus actual within that unrestricted value each year.
Yeah,
We can start getting the budgeted too.
I mean, they tell you different things. This is certainly great. I think it really answers a lot of the questions for sure. I think some of the questions though have to do with budgets, so I think that might be helpful to have some budgetary.
Deal. I'll work on getting some of that. That's one that we can scrape kind of easily. And, yeah, how many
Cool.
years back did we want to go? Like 5 or how many years?
Yeah, I don't know, what do you guys think is enough to show what? I think the real uptick in trend in terms of cash, it started in like 2020 or 2021, and so maybe going back 2 or 3 years before that to establish a baseline trend prior to that might be helpful.
2018, might be,
Yeah.
might be a way to go.
This is Howard. How far does it go back right now? I'm sorry, I didn't see when you pulled that down.
You're all good. It goes back till 2018.
Yeah.
We have a couple 2016, 2017 values, but they're very sparse. So most of the time when you click 2016 and 2017, you won't get very much information. So that's where I'd say to keep the main baseline.
I mean, how hard would it be to just go back and pick a specific year, say 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and populate that data?
So getting just a single year, so getting like 2015s and 2025s.
I would say go back and get let's say go before the financial 2008 and get a just so we have a more of a longitudinal something we could base, maybe 2000 or 2005, or just pick one back so we could just see how much has changed. We may not be able to pick the year or the years in which we saw dramatic change, but if there's a dramatic change from 2000, that might be interesting.
I'll look into it. My first and tentative answer is it could be kind of difficult. But I'll see if we can get back before the 08 financial crash. Some of the issues when you start going back too far is government entities change names, they come into being and out of being. So it can be a little bit more complicated to get all the data married together. But any entities that have existed back then and exist today, we'd be able to show budget information, other accurate. That said, though, we probably would need to reduce the scope a little because a lot of these values are coming from 2018 onwards. That's when the state auditor's office and treasurer's office adopted Salesforce as a CRM and data repository and started pulling some of these numbers out and logging them or requiring governmental entities to submit that data. So yes, the reports are there, but getting that data out of the reports could take a bit of time. But we'll look into it and see if it's possible to do before the next meeting.
Well, even if we found, like, if we looked at the averages that you're finding now and we saw that correlated well to us, but I wouldn't suggest we have to do it for every entity, but if we found an entity that was representative of the average, or maybe there's some way, and it's not critical that we have it, but it would just be very interesting to know if this has changed a lot over time and generally when it changed.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it'd be cool to see this over longer periods, like 20 years. So we'll see what we can do. I like it. Is it okay if we switch over to the statewide and show a similar thing?
All right, perfect. So on our statewide explorer, we have a couple similar things, a couple things that are a little different. So this top part, we are able to see unrestricted cash over each of our entities when we select a government level. So right now we have school districts selected. So we're able to see all of our school districts unrestricted cash. If you want to see a specific value, just toggle your mouse over that. You're able to scroll through and down if I move.
And this is as of the end of the year.
Yeah, oh, sorry, I should have mentioned that. We are able to select whatever year we want.
So it would be like June 30th, 2023.
Yeah, depends on the entity's fiscal year. Yes, the end of their fiscal year.
Okay. Are they all gonna be the same? With school district?
School district will all have the same, but different entities will not.
Right, yeah.
So we're able to scroll through all of these to view ones with less. And with the most. We also have expenditure over each entity, so we're able to see over for a specific year selected, how much each district or whatever government level we select is spending. One of our other plots that's a little different, we just included the median unrestricted cash and cash equivalents by government level, so we were able to just see how this spread is. So with school district, we have this median. If I select charter school from up here, we'll be able to see a difference in that median cash that each different government level is receiving. This takes a minute to load. There we go. But with charter school, we're able to toggle over. They have a little over median, which is to be expected. And then we have the same ratios that we had in our single entity explorer, just now looking at the government levels. And then we have the same kind of deposit levels by banking type and our total market value by our security type.
Hey, there you go, your charter schools have more of the qualified bank CDs.
There you go. Interesting. Cool. And then okay, that's another clear.
Let's go show the outlier tab. This is my
Perfect.
favorite slots.
Yeah, so our final tab is our outliers tab. Our beginning visual, we just are able to show the distribution of unrestricted cash by government level. And for this box plot, you're able to select each year to kind of see how those are changing. So I'm selecting 2022. Those change. For this, you're able to toggle over each government level and each outlier to be able to see which outlier. We also included in the outlier part when you toggle over which entity it's coming from. And then we
those
have-
are dollar amounts. Can we achieve the same distribution like using a ratio?
We can add that. We don't have it yet, but we can definitely add that. So that you can maybe.
So you're normalizing it for size, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how we handle the normalizing is on this x-axis, you can see it's a log scale. So that way your larger ones, it's not lost in the size disparity, but yeah, let's get the ratios in there. I think that's a great idea.
I have one more suggestion.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons for a lot of the growth has been inflation, because this has been a hugely inflationary period. So if you go on the Fed website and you look up the inflation rate every year, the CPIU is the one I would use, is the CPIU. And then you net that out, in other words, put it into real dollars. I think that tells you the story of what the real growth has been, because obviously we're assuming that the growth should keep pace with inflation, right?
Yeah.
But if it's over and above inflation, that's when I think, we might need to take a look at and understand the reasons why it's been over and above inflation, but kind of taking that inflation out, I think that's gonna give you a better picture of, is there truly excess in there? Yeah.
Yeah, we could definitely add inflation. Would you want it as like a toggle? Would you want it as its own separate?
Yeah, maybe look at it, all those ratios, you can look at them in real dollars instead of, nominal dollars or something. Maybe make that a toggle. I mean, I know that's asking a lot, but the tool is really cool, and if you can do that, that would make the data really useful, so.
Yeah, I think we can definitely add that.
Yeah, so when you say a toggle,
Oh, yeah, cool.
when you say a toggle, you mean like an option. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Exactly. Kind of like where you see like that select year up here at the top left, we would have another one that's maybe like a little, almost like a light switch button or something.
Cool. Could
I
you
think that's a
go,
great idea.
sorry, could you go back to the deposits by bank type? Just curious how you categorize that.
Yeah, do you want the government level?
The state
One.
level is,
Okay,
I'm just curious how you are breaking out the banks by type, I can't quite see that.
So you have a lot of these come from the DNI reports, and these are just standard categories in that report. Checking, money market funds, PTIF, savings and sweep. There's a couple more if, so right now, the two government types we have selected only have those five. But if government type has a different one, it would be additional column.
Okay, yeah, I see. I don't quite read the graph. It might be helpful, and maybe this will come later, just to see deposits by. Like type of bank, like large bank or Utah headquartered local banks, and
Will we go that deep in the detail you have?
our department has a lot of that data for the public funds, so. We can chat about that offline, but.
Yeah.
But we only have it in an aggregate level.
I think if you're using DNI report, they specify which bank, that is a drop down, so it's standardized, it's not like they're just typing in. Wells or Wells Fargo or whatever, it's a drop down, which forces anybody that chooses Wells Fargo to be the same, so. You probably could extract that, you know, as long as you talk to DFI and have them tell you which banks they categorize as. Local community banks versus kind of large regional banks.
So, yeah, we could sync offline, but it sounds like there's local, regional, and then what are these?
National,
National?
there may be regionals that are headquartered here, like Zions versus not, right?
Yeah. We can chat more, but I think it'd be helpful to see like.
Can I say ultimately, for the purposes of, I think what we're shooting for in terms of overall economic impact, benefit, we'll have, you know, I don't know that it's so much to the charter type, but coming up with some kind of an analysis of how much a particular bank is lending in Utah. I think Wyoming has a program for this, so maybe Treasurer Oaks, we may want to look at what Wyoming does in this regard to try to distinguish. It could be an industrial bank that does no lending in Utah, or one that does a lot. The charter type, I don't know, is a critical thing, and I think it's good to know. I'm not suggesting it's not, but for the purposes we're getting at it in terms of economic impact, we're going to probably have to come up with another way to measure a bank's activities and what that impact would be.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Howard. I think we can definitely get aggregate data in terms of banks lending in the state versus their deposits in the state. That's available, but. I think the trickier part is drilling down to like a community level. I think that might be harder to. Get to, but that's, I think, something you can think about more.
Well, and the industrial banks aren't even taking public funds deposits, we're really talking about the. Qualified depositories, which are all commercial banks, right?
Yeah, I think currently.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two industrial banks, but I don't think there are any that really hold any material amount of public funds.
Yeah.
And then your credit unions.
Right, credit union, banks or credit unions, right?
Yeah, I do think there's value to stratifying on size of the bank, because my understanding is that smaller banks tend to lend to smaller entities, and as you grow in size, you do less with smaller entities, so I don't know if that'll show in the data.
So in general, that's true, but not always necessarily. Like a locally headquartered regional bank like Zions might, do more in terms of smaller local commercial lending, but in general, what you're saying is true for sure. Smaller local community banks tend to make smaller local small business loans, so it's definitely true on average.
We can definitely look into adding that, especially since we have the bank names, and as long as we can get a category given by someone, we can categorize the data. But I guess I'm just trying to understand, what is it we're hoping to understand by that stratification? Is it just out of interest? Like, how did these ratios change? What are we?
Yeah, I think just being consistent to the purpose of the task force, it's if we were to put $1 in bank A, what's the likelihood that that dollar is going to be lent into Utah, let's just say, because I agree with Dan. I don't know how much more granular we can get. And again, Wyoming has some kind of a formula. I'm not vouching for it, but I know they have something. And this is more of a money management council discussion, and that the money management council has always been focused on safety and soundness. We want, if public treasurer is going to put money in a local bank, we want to make sure that that money is safe, and they had an allotment, and that allotment can change based upon regulatory actions related to that bank. And so that's a lens on safety and soundness. This is what we're doing in the task force here, is talking about an economic lens of saying what $1 of deposit in this bank is going to do for Utah versus $1 deposit in this bank, and coming up with some kind of a category or a system of categories where we could. The goal of this task force is to make sure that we get Utah money fueling Utah growth. And so every bank isn't going to be the same. Every credit union isn't going to be the same.
Gotcha. So it's almost like, okay, we put some money into the PTIF as an example, or some kind of deposit, and that bank itself, how much are they investing in Utah versus globally?
Oh, I was talking about actual banks, but if you're talking about this account type, that's why I was asking Marlo earlier, what percentage of the PTIF funds or the money market funds, or maybe even the sweep funds, could we consider to be deployed in the state of Utah in terms of, economic investment? And I concur with them. It's probably very, very small. But even within the banking, that checking number, $1 in one bank could yield an entirely different economic outcome for Utah than $1 in another FDIC insured checking account.
Yeah, so if all those deposits and checking account were at JP Morgan, for example, the impact in Utah would be much lower than if all of those dollars were in local community banks. Just as an example, right?
It could be, but yeah,
Right.
I mean, that's an argument that could be made. We'd have to come up with a model to figure it out for sure, because obviously, like whether it's JP Morgan Chase or whether it's even America First that's operating in multiple states, how do we determine what a deposit in Utah is being potentially lent into Arizona? Does that make sense?
Because all banks are going to try to maximize their return for their shareholders or their bankers. So yeah, you can't, unless you're actually saying, hey, you can invest in these banks and that money will stay in investments in Utah itself. It's really hard for anyone to tell, no matter where they're banking.
Deposits are fungible. It's not like you can tie a deposit to a specific loan. It's all balance sheet management at the bank level.
Yeah, the call report shows, Utah sourced deposits, and breaks it out by state. And I think you can look at lending by state. And so you may see a situation where a JP Morgan Chase is actually pulling deposits in from other states and making more loans in Utah than it's collecting deposits in Utah. So it could be the opposite of what you might be thinking.
Although although you're gonna see that kind of lending most likely with larger institutions in the state, right? A large bank is not likely going to be lending to small enterprise in Tintic, for example. But yes, you make a great point.
We just want to see, so if somebody is lending at a rate higher than collecting deposits in Utah, that we could put a deposit in that bank and be pretty comfortable that that's going to yield an economic benefit in Utah. If you see the opposite, where they're collecting deposits in Utah but primarily lending in Nevada or some other place, then maybe they get a different rating, and we would drive fewer deposits into that bank. I mean, they're all my members, and so I got to be careful, but I want to be true to what we're trying to do here, and that is generate economic impact in Utah with these funds.
Yeah.
In that discussion, I presume that perhaps a foundational principle of all of that movement would be the security of the deposits and the yield associated with it that ties in with the Utah Money Management Act. So assuming that, I guess in this discussion, assuming that all of that is equal, we have this discussion up here of what money is going to be used in Utah and so forth. Is that a accurate description, or are we concerned about some of these other elements shifting on the foundation as we look at these possibilities that money be used in Utah?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to separate the where this may end up. What we need right now is information that can inform conversations that may lead to those kinds of discussions, right? But I think at this point, we just need to get the data, and then where does it take us, and what does that mean, right? That those are gonna be more nuanced conversations, and maybe they may lead to areas that we haven't anticipated at this point. But the most important thing is, can we get good data to base our decisions on?
I would offer that I think we need to have that as a foundation, but there's also a discussion on what other aspects of benefit are there coming, monetary as well as other, to investing in Utah. I think that needs to be a piece of that conversation as well.
Yeah, I thought that the description, it was just, and I couldn't see who gave it. It is a good nutshell of what we're doing, except for the definition of the word yield.
Well, that's
Right now, we're looking at the return, and I think the study that we're commissioning is going to try to expand that definition of yield to incorporate a broader economic benefit to the state. So otherwise, I think that was a good description.
Yeah. Good. Discussion. Is that helpful, Alex?
very helpful.
Well, so Alex, you're telling me though, you do have like individual bank names in the data points?
Yeah, we have it, for some of the deposit and investment information in our single entity explorer. So we're able to see different kind of bank types here. For that part, but
We could make like a big tab where you can just like
Yeah.
select a bank. Skip on go on. Yeah. So short answer, we don't have that on this dashboard, but I think we can definitely expand on this. I think we only have a few more tables.
yeah,
to show
we
you
just have
guys.
some tables.
keep the discussion going. I think it's on the outlier page.
Yeah, so on the outlier page, after looking at that, we also have a heat map table showing a percent change of unrestricted cash. And then we also have some statistics by government level, so we just included like the min, the first quartile, the median, third quartile, maximum and standard deviation. And some of those are highlighted for just higher values, in our whole data set. And then our final table just provides you with information of the unrestricted cash by entity and year. So if you want to look at a specific entity, Legacy Preparatory Academy, you can look that up and see all the unrestricted cash for each year from 2018 to 2024.
The idea of it is you can start really big, looking at government levels, see outliers, see dispersion, and then get more granular with your searches.
So is that across all funds? Is that like enterprise funds, general funds,
Yeah, just total.
capital projects, everything? Okay.
And we can add those other ratios in here. We just started with the unrestricted cash, just to give you an idea of what we can do with a single metric. Yeah.
So the assumption is then that they're in compliance with fund balance reserve percentages, depending on what kind of entity they are
Yeah,
and what fund it is, but it's all combined in there. Okay.
yeah, we're presuming they're in that little sweet spot of what is it, about 25?
Or else- Our
Or else we would,
discussion.
yeah, we were
Yeah.
having a different
Yeah.
discussion. That's why we have this.
Okay.
All right, guys, so good work.
I would like to point out, Marcy is a new employee in the state auditor's office. This is our first major project and I am really proud of the work she's done.
Thank you.
It's really nice.
Yes.
That's great. So then are we able to play with this?
Yeah, so we have, let me ask you guys a quick question. We have, the older version of the dashboard and I sent out that link a few weeks ago. Do you guys still want to use that one or do you prefer I just overwrite this new dashboard with that link? I just want you guys overwhelmed and like, oh man, sent like 3 different links. Where's the dashboard I want to look at? Bro, it's fun.
Well, if you date the link, that's fine, we can. This is something we'll start dating. Okay. Cool, whatever.
Mhm.
So overwrite the original link.
Yeah, it's override. That way, no matter what email we go to, we get to the right place.
There you go.
There you go. All right, cool. We'll get that updated later tonight. I have a couple things I have to do this evening, so it might be tomorrow, sometime in the middle of the day. And then, yeah, you'll be able to play with this, break it. If you find bugs, shoot us an email. Where you have like, oh, now that I'm playing with it, I'd love to add this feature. Or we're here to help you guys out. So let us know what you need.
Excellent.
And then are you guys, you're gonna work on budget data and inflation data and some of that stuff too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That'll just get added as you develop it over time, right?
Yeah.
Under the same link.
That's how we were
Correct.
Okay.
We'll try and get that for the next.
Okay, I think so.
I think the inflation, I think most of these we can all get done before the next meeting. The getting budgeted data back to 2018 could take a little bit of time. It might take more than a month, but we'll shoot for it.
Well, I don't think we're meeting
We're
in July.
2 months
Oh, 2
out.
months, perfect.
Our next meeting's
Yeah.
August,
Yeah.
something,
Yes, I mean,
mid-August,
yeah.
about 2 months away.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Good. Okay, any, let's see. Future meeting topics, Brittany, did you have any thoughts on
Or was
that?
there any other thoughts on data in general,
Yeah, I guess any other
or the studies?
input on the data or the studies, I guess.
I didn't know, like, I know part of what we talked about is having a discussion. Just like with the CFOs of some of these larger entities, and just say, hey, why do you think your balances have grown? And, where do you think it's coming from, or whatever, just to get maybe some. I mean, the CFOs know what's going on, right? So
Or
I probably just ask them.
or a survey.
Yeah, or a survey, yeah, either a survey or a conversation or whatever, and kind of aggregate some of that information and, see if there's common themes about what they're telling us,
I agree with that. I think that could be very helpful, especially if you ask them their views on, appropriate levels and things like that as well. I'd like to hear from them. I think we're going to hear from them one way or the other, so might as well hear from them now. The other issue I would just like this is an amazing dashboard, so thank you to the folks in the auditor's office for building it. I think it's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, we'll make sure to add that to the survey we send out. Sounds like everyone, should we just send it to all the CFOs? Or just the ones that are outliers, just the big ones? How are we feeling about that?
Who do you want it from?
What's the correlation of outliers to those that are not big? Do we have many outliers that are not big? I'm just curious.
What's interesting is kind of have outliers on both ends. We're gonna have some that are, we're not having a lot, and some that are having quite a bit, so.
It seemed like outliers would make sense, and you could obviously expand it beyond that, but it would seem that outliers would be.
Well, there would be outliers on the upper end, right?
Yeah, I think it makes sense at least to target a certain. Like, I don't want it to be an overwhelming amount of data, but like we target some of the larger entities, I would say. Some of the larger, and try and get some from all municipal types, so. Cities, counties. Special service districts, just so you can kind of determine if the growth's occurring in certain entity types, or if it's, more broad-based for all entities, or what's going on.
I question just targeting the outliers though, because I think some of the explanations or the general trends that we're doing. could be
Yeah, I think it would be
valuable.
helpful to have not just the outliers, like have everybody, so that, maybe get all the outliers, but then also have some others that you can compare against.
So you're asking the median as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that you have some good medians and stuff, yeah.
Will there be resistance to?
I was just gonna say, I think you
No,
need to
let's ask
make
Todd.
sure you couch it under a certain.
We've presented multiple times,
Yeah.
both in our communities up on the hill, State Board of Education, told my story before. Think so,
Yeah,
we're good to share.
right.
Maybe how you ask it is
Right.
going to be helpful or hurtful, I guess. I mean, if you're.
We'll send it
Hey.
from Marlowe instead of from my office.
Right, there we go, yes, yes, that, right there.
Just
Well,
speak-
I'm gonna say it out loud, yeah, so because asking, right?
Exactly.
If the auditor asks, they're gonna be like, oh, so are we in trouble?
That's what we take away.
You're doing something wrong, and.
And if Marlo asks, I'll be like, oh, do I really need to reply?
Right.
That hurts. No, I just think if you're, I don't know, I'm not saying I know the answer to my question either, but just that if we're. I don't know, if we can convey it somehow, hey, we're just trying to understand, we've seen some changes, we just want to understand, so we're better able to know what those trends are going to mean for the future of our governmental entities, like fund balance reserve percentages and requirements and things like that. That's, I mean, I don't know how much detail you want to get into that either, because that could also, cause them to kind of, sky is falling type of attitude, but however we can say, hey, we're just trying to understand, we're looking into some things so that we can better adapt to our economy as a state and across all governmental entities. I think they'll get some better results.
Can I just make
Yeah.
a practical suggestion? I want to be sensitive to my colleagues in the association business. Let's be honest. I mean, they're going to reach out to the league or the association of counties or whatever. I think whatever plan we have in terms of soliciting input needs to be coordinated with those groups. They're going to also know who the people. I mean, we all have outliers. I don't know how to describe it, but they're going to be able to point us in the direction of the most thoughtful people as well. So I guess what I don't want to do is come up with a plan and then execute it without any consideration of the associations, just because I think that's a little offensive, number one, and it's a little naive because there's gonna be some interaction there anyway. So we might as well use it to our advantage rather than try to skirt it, I guess.
So the associations would be, cities and towns, counties.
Special districts.
Special districts.
Sit-
District administrators.
Yeah, but so USBE ended up probably being the association channel.
Okay.
Yeah, sit down with them and tell them what we're trying to do and see if they have some suggestions as how best to get that information, especially weighing it with the current workload of all these folks. Because the last thing I want to do is make that more complicated to folks. But we do want to be open to input.
We have reps from those organizations here at the table.
We know the CFOs don't have anything to do in year end.
Mark goes till December.
I'm trying to, sorry, I'm trying to feel empathy.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay, no, that's good. So I guess you guys will come up with the survey
Yeah.
and then let's coordinate. And
Yeah, we'll
reach out.
We'd like to weigh in on that.
I think you should
Brittany.
lead that because
Oh, wow.
I think you should lead that. I mean, we're happy to
Yeah.
provide any of the data and circulate it. But I don't know that we're the best place to start those questions
Okay.
because especially on an investment, that's not our specialty.
That sounds good. We can leave that.
I'm happy to use our like contact lists, like we already have.
Oh,
those
yeah.
people.
Yeah, we can reach them for
That'd be
you,
awesome.
But
Yeah.
but designing that survey, if you want that to be investment based or where this task force is going is not necessarily our specialty. Our specialty is the data and the analytics.
Okay. Yeah, Brittany and I'll work on that together.
And if anybody in this group has feedback as to what should be on that, we'll send obviously before we finalize it, but as we're in the initial stages of crafting, if you have any ideas, welcome that.
Yeah.
I would think that the legislative branch is one of the folks that has the most interest in this area. So maybe I don't know, a senator or a representative, there may be somebody who could represent your questions, interests, and so forth, make sure that that is included in these questions.
It's just a matter of when we're trying to get good information, lead to good policy and help us be our best version. We're not trying, we're not on any sort of
Which one? I said this.
Well said, Senator, well said.
That's good. I think from my perspective, if having focus as we discussed, that will help us to achieve the outcomes desirable from the legislative standpoint or the treasurer's office or the auditor's office. If we had something like that and For example, if that were given to me, I would approach perhaps a half dozen chief financial officers with a few districts and just say, would you take a look at this? This is what their objective is. Can you tell us your sense? Is some of this information going to be difficult for you to get? Seeing their objectives, is there some additional way that can be crafted to provide additional information or something? Anyway, I would suggest doing that so that we can be helpful in providing some feedback for consideration.
Gives ownership, gives ownership and
Yeah.
involvement in
Uh-huh.
a very, I think, a very natural way.
So it's
Yeah.
hands-on,
Like-
yeah, so then we can go ahead and come back and say, let's send it out to everyone. You've got feedback from some CFOs in various entities, and you can go ahead with some comfort, I think.
What about utilizing the UGFOA board then for that?
Mhm.
I don't know who's on it right now, but that might be a good start.
That would help us avoid having CFOs coming back to me and saying, LeGrand, this doesn't work, and say, well, I'm gonna let you,
Yeah,
after it's all kind of crafted,
Right.
get some feedback from them, and then we can move ahead as you see fit, but at least we'll maybe get a little feedback for you that might be helpful.
Yeah, that's great. That's good. Okay, great.
One other thing we could do with feedback, we've done this on other dashboards. People can put their feedback or context in the app. So if you select Alpine CFO can give an explanation. Do we want to have that as part of the survey? So they're aware of like, oh, if I want to give context for my data, anyone can see it. It usually increases response rates when it is there. Any thoughts on that or concerns about doing that?
I think that'll be fine. I think any additional information, I think is gonna be nothing but helpful. I would think.
Yeah.
But if it's manageable,
I don't see any downside.
Yeah.
Ability and if there's context and good information. Well,
Todd, what do you think?
it's probably gonna come down to the quality of the input you get and relaxing answers.
Well said.
it sounds like that survey will be electronic. Is that,
Yeah,
okay, that would be very nice, yeah.
I prefer not to take written stuff.
Yeah.
complicates things.
Yeah, okay, that's great. All right, anything else on the data? All right, so future meeting topics. We will have our study.
I think it'd be helpful now that we have this capacity, just really have a high level macro summary. Of where we are as a state, that'd be helpful to, Carmen, those, that information and have them. And an executive summary at some point, but before we are, I think that we could use a point of reference for our discussion moving forward.
Mhm. What would you envision in that summary? Just the information that we have on the dashboard kind of a thing, or?
Well, it's maybe it would be nice to have a discussion on what does it mean? We have the numbers, but what's behind it?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a remarkable grade trust right here. What are we seeing and then what are the
Implications.
implications of what we're seeing?
Mhm.
That's, I think the information itself is going to be very valuable, but it's now, okay, that's what are we sensing?
Mhm.
What are we observing?
Mhm.
How is
Yeah.
that aligned with our?
I agree with that. I think that's where we need to go next is, task force members wanna spend some time with the data and then. Theorize on what they think it's suggesting in terms of. Where balances are coming from and what's appropriate and, if it's all. Is it all being used efficiently and effectively, or are there areas where we believe that. Maybe it's in excess or, those sorts of thoughts and comments. I mean, everybody in this room is. Financial expert in their own way, and so having those perspectives and discussing them, I think would probably make a helpful conversation next time,
Is there a way to tell where the money is coming from, whether it's taxes or federal? Inflation Reduction Act or investments or.
But to go to financial statements and their effort and just drill down,
But it's probably in a note.
it may be.
As Kurt mentioned earlier, the chief financial officers, I think, would have an absolute.
The survey's gonna help with that there, right?
That's a good question, though. That's really good.
Just the nature of how, and you better correct me if I'm wrong on this one. But just the nature of how COVID money was sent in, they had to spend the COVID money first. So
Right,
by default, what you have is the tax revenue that was replaced, those expenditures that were replaced by the COVID money. So I think you could tell at this point that it's taxed. Why it's there is different than what is there. And that's the new.
the hard part about it is that all of that ARPA money is one time, right? So
Exactly.
it's hard to adjust budgets based on a one-time infusion of money that comes in. And so that's what you gotta figure out is like.
It was
now-
multiple times.
Well,
but I
okay,
digress.
yes.
So, but that's been my concern over this from the
Yeah.
beginning, is you have to recognize that influx of cash gave them the ability to spend that instead of the regular tax revenue. So while you will see an
Yes.
increase in the reserves being tax money by default,
Yeah,
because they had to spend the COVID money first,
right,
that's still an impact, but you can't identify it based on it's COVID money that's sitting there, because that's not what should be sitting there anymore.
and then it was compounded by our office because we started making 5%.
Exactly.
Nobody.
You made all sorts of money on top of the money.
5% on the cash and so. Yeah, sorry for compounding the problem.
I'll take that.
To do it well.
Say to your point too, like, getting to know the specific entity that we think is an outlier is important too, because I know like we've talked about Alpine School District and to my knowledge, they're about split
Yeah, they're gonna,
3 districts, right? At least 2,
so
but I think 3.
it's
So,
three.
I mean, you've got
I'm just glad I'm not
district that's about
superintending
to-
one of those.
Yeah, it's about to get completely changed, their financials are gonna completely change, and being that I'm in a different city than I was a year and a half ago, I was at a city that belonged into Alpine School District, and a city that has less than 10% capture rate on sales tax, point of sale within its boundaries. Basically hemorrhaging sales tax everywhere else, but within the city itself, it's Eagle Mountain. Because it's got 75,000 people and it still doesn't have a second McDonald's yet. So where are they shopping? Well, they're shopping in Saratoga Springs. So when you're talking about splitting a school district, everybody was panicked because they're like, well, we don't have the commercial tax base to support, offsetting just a really huge tax rate for the residents to be able to sustain a school district. But the WPU, so the weighted pupil unit, the tax that the state gives per pupil actually blew away the commercial tax revenue. So when you have cities that are saying, hey, we're, in Orem or whatever, well, Orem's still Alpine. Anyway, you have east side cities in Utah County that are saying, hey, you guys are threatening to shut schools down, yet you're building new schools out in Saratoga Springs and Eagle Mountain. We're funding that. Well, actually, Eagle Mountain and Saratoga Springs are holding those schools open in Orem because they're not drawing enough money from the WPU to keep those schools open. So they're funding it from West Side money. So a lot of times we think that it's really this way, and it's actually completely opposite. So I think looking at entities individually and really getting the, drilling down, well, why do you have what you have? What is it slated for? What are you going to spend it on? Are you about to build a $130 million high school, which Alpine is? Then yeah, they may have a lot of reserves that they built up in anticipation of that.
Well, and I do think that in this environment where rates are higher, people are trying to save up and build rather than just bonding for it. Because when rates were low, it's like, well, we'll just bond for it. We don't necessarily need to save up. But now that it's a lot more expensive to bond, I think they're probably trying to reserve as much cash as they can for capital, which is
Yeah,
Not that, as long as they're using it for capital and they don't just keep it in bond for it all anyway.
right,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, good. All right.
Mr.
Anything
Chairman,
else?
as
Yes.
this is fascinating discussion about reserves and why they're there and what's there. I think we knew that the first part of this task force is going to be focused in on this and the data. And again, commend those who are pulling it together. And I love to get that kind of insight and texture from the people who really understand it, the CFOs of these entities. So I like where we're going with the survey and using the associations and getting that, custom input in here. At some juncture, we're gonna transition the discussion to, okay, with whatever reserves we have, how is it best for the state of Utah to deploy those reserves? And what is yield? What should we be looking at when we talk about yield? I think you saw this email exchange, but Dr. Richard Werner I've heard him speak on this issue. Treasurer Oaks, I think you know who he is. I would love at some future meeting to maybe invite him to come present to us on a kind of the macroeconomic impacts. I think he talks about the size of bank and the size of organizations that they lend to, all kinds of, I think, going to be very important things.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we've connected him with the group that will likely be conducting the study and hopefully have him at our next meeting. Dr. Warner.
Excellent.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's gonna be hard to beat this exciting data, but I think we're just gonna keep getting better and better every day. So a lot of good stuff coming, I think, so. Anything else anybody wants to add? If not, we need to take an official adjournment action, or can I just say we're adjourned? Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.